I was scrubbing the marble floors of Renmore House when the old man in the library looked up. "You clean along the grain, just like my daughter used to." I forced a smile. A fresh bruise dark on my cheek. I was just the night cleaner. He was the anonymous tenant. A week later, under boardroom lights, he placed a will before me. "If you tell the truth," he whispered, "I'll give you this house and the seat they think you don't deserve." My name is Clara Whitfield. I am 27 years old. The 10:00 p.m. bus always smells like wet wool and exhaust. It groans through the streets of Halverton, a city that feels like it's perpetually dissolving in a cold, fine drizzle. Tonight, the mist clings to the windows, blurring the streetlights into greasy thumbprints. I pull the collar of my thin coat tighter. Underneath my work uniform, a drab blue polo shirt and stiff cotton pants, my skin is cold. I get off at the last stop, the one no one else uses, the stop before the gates of Renmore House. Renmore doesn't sit on its hill. It commands it. It's not a house. It's an institution, a great sunken ship of gray stone and black slate, moored in a dark sea of ancient skeletal elm trees. The iron gates are high and severe, the name Renmore not displayed, as if assuming you already know. I use a key card, the kind reserved for staff, the kind that only works between 10:00 p.m. and 4:00 a.m., on a discreet panel by the service entrance. The door clicks open into a different world. The air inside is warm, perfectly still, and heavy with the scent of beeswax and something old and floral. Like dried roses, out here, the city smells of decay. In here, it smells of preservation. I am Clara Whitfield, risk analyst for Meridian and Wake Holdings. I am also Clara Whitfield, night cleaner for North Line Sanitation, assigned exclusively to this house. My hands, which by day analyze spreadsheets and risk models, pull on thick, cuffed rubber gloves. I grab the yellow bucket, the industrial strength mop, the cart of silent, rubber-wheeled supplies. My second shift begins. The extra job is a necessity, a desperate plug in a leaking dam. Meridian and Wake, in their infinite wisdom, had initiated strategic restructuring, which meant my salary was optimized, cut by 20%, while my workload doubled. So I clean. I clean to cover the gap. I clean to pay for the small apartment my father thinks I can't afford. I clean, mostly, so I can come home so late and so exhausted that I don't have to think. Tonight, the work is harder. Every time I bend over the bucket, a sharp, localized pain radiates from my left cheekbone. It's a dull, throbbing purple, hidden mostly by my hair, but I can feel its heat. Sloan Armitage, my stepmother, the chief financial officer of Meridian and Wake Holdings, has a heavy hand and a sharp diamond. It happened at 6:15 p.m., in the server room on the 44th floor, the one place where the security cameras have a convenient, structural blind spot. I had found it. The discrepancy. A 2.3% bleed from the Bracken Fund, redirected through 3 shell accounts, one of which I recognized. Northline Sanitation, my night job. I hadn't even accused her. I had simply asked, "Sloan, these server logs show your terminal authorized the transfer, but the amounts don't reconcile with the custodial report. Can you clarify?" Clarification came fast. The air conditioning hummed, masking the sharp crack of her rings against my face. "A slip of the hand," she'd hissed, flexing her fingers. "An accident. You are not paid to clarify. Clara, you are paid to analyze the data I give you. You've been unfocused. Get this report standardized by morning." The sting of it was nothing compared to the ice in her voice. The server room smelled like ozone and cold. Sterile air. I tasted metal. Now, hours later, that metallic taste is replaced by the lemon ammonia scent of the floor cleaner. Renmore is a house of rules. A laminated sheet in the janitor's closet dictates my every move. Vacuum patterns on all rugs must run north to south. Brass fixtures are to be polished with solvent 4. Silver with 7. Do not touch the thermostat. And the most important one, capitalized and underlined in red ink. Absolutely no communication with the tenant of the East Library. Staff are to be invisible. The tenant, not the owner, a peculiar, impersonal word. The East Library is the last room on my route. It's vast, 2 stories high, walled with books that haven't been touched in decades. The air in here is different from the rest of the house. It's the smell of dry oak, old, acidic paper, and the faint, rich scent of leather bindings slowly releasing their vanillin. It smells like time itself. And it's the only room that's occupied. Every night, as I mop the wide planked floor, I hear him. I never see his face. Just a shape in a high-backed leather chair in a far alcove, illuminated by a single green-shaded desk lamp. Tonight, the only sounds are the drizzle against the tall, leaded glass windows and the slow, rhythmic slosh of my mop in the bucket. Then, the other sound. The sound that is always here, the scratch glide of a heavy-nibbed fountain pen on thick, expensive paper, and beneath that, the sound of steady, even breathing, in, hold, out, the measured breath of a man who is thinking, not sleeping. I am scrubbing the great marble inlay at the library's entrance. The stone is black, veined with white that looks like lightning trapped in ice. I'm tired. My cheek throbs, and I'm scrubbing against the grain, fighting the stone. You're doing it wrong. The voice cuts through the silence. It's not loud, but it's rough, like dry paper crumpled. I freeze. My heart hammers against my ribs. Do not engage. I keep my head down, my back to the alcove. The marble, the voice says. Closer. I hadn't even heard him stand. You follow the vein. You clean with the grain, not against it. That's how you make it shine. My daughter used to do it that way. I risk a glance. He's standing near the desk now, but still in shadow. All I can see is the hand he rests on a stack of books. It's an old hand, the skin thin as parchment, but the fingers are long and steady. On his 4th finger is a ring, a simple, wide band of platinum, worn almost smooth with time, but I can just make out the engraving. It's a deep, stylized, almost Gothic letter K. It's faded, but unmistakable. I just nod. Once, I turn back to the floor, dip the mop, and follow the vein as he said, "The ammonia smell stings my eyes," or maybe it's something else. I scrub the stone, the motion hypnotic. When I am done, I move back into the great hall. The ceiling soars 3 stories, and from its center hangs a chandelier that is a waterfall of crystal. The light hits it not with warmth, but with a cold, blue-white glare, making the prisms look like shards of ice. High above, in the carved mahogany vortex of the ceiling, I see it, the black, mirrored dome camera. It's watching. In its convex, distorted reflection, I see myself, a small, hunched figure in a blue uniform, dwarfed by the opulence. The chandelier refracts my image, breaking me into a dozen tiny, kneeling pieces. I am a ghost who scrubs the floors, recorded by a machine. I continue my rounds, dusting the silent drawing rooms, the long, cold dining hall. In a small parlor off the main hall, I find a new object. Leaning against a bookshelf filled with identical leather-bound volumes is a cane. It's not a medical cane, not aluminum or functional plastic. This is an heirloom. It's made of dark, polished walnut, heavy and smooth, with a simple, unadorned silver handle. I pick it up. It's perfectly balanced, but the tip is strange. The ferrule isn't rubber. It's brass, and set into the very end is a small, dark green glass dot, like a tiny lens. As my fingers wrap around the handle, I feel a slight vibration, and a tiny, faint green light blinks once from inside the wood, just beneath my thumb, before vanishing. This is not just a cane. This is technology, disguised as an antique. I set it back, exactly as I found it, wiping my fingerprints from the handle with my cleaning cloth. I am in the main service corridor, wringing out the mop head over the deep porcelain utility sink, when my phone buzzes in my pocket. The The vibration is harsh against my leg. The corridor smells of bleach and damp concrete. I pull out my phone. The screen is cracked. A new text message. Sender: Sloan Armitage. Time: 1:17 a.m. Clara: the Q3 reconciliation has been flagged by audit. The discrepancies trace directly to your access logs. Be prepared to present a full accounting of the errors at the 7:00 a.m. emergency meeting. Have your mitigation analysis and a full letter of resignation ready. My blood turns to ice water. A full accounting, a letter of resignation. She isn't just throwing me under the bus, she's building the bus, putting me in the driver's seat, and pointing it off a cliff. The 7:00 a.m. meeting is my execution. The errors are her theft. My access logs are the ones she used my terminal for when I was in a mandatory team-building webinar. My hands, protected by the rubber gloves, grip the edge of the sink. The rubber squeaks against the porcelain. I can't breathe. I have 6 hours. I finish my cart. My movement's automatic. All the brass is shined. All the rugs are vacuumed north to south. I push the cart back to the closet. I have one last thing to do. Walk back through the house for a final visual check. The great hall is silent. The ice chandelier is dim. I stand at the entrance to the East Library. The rain has stopped. The room is dark, except for that single green-shaded lamp. The old man is no longer at his desk. He's standing by the tall window, looking out at the dark, wet grounds. His back is to me. I am 20 feet away, invisible, a night cleaner, a ghost. The weight of the 7:00 a.m. text, the throb of the bruise on my cheek, the smell of the bleach on my hands, the sheer, crushing unfairness of it all rises in my throat. I say it to the room, to the shadows, to the man who is not to be spoken to. My voice is barely a whisper. I clean every night, I say, the words tasting like ash, but they're dirty every day. He doesn't move. He doesn't turn. The only sound is the slow, heavy talk of the grandfather clock in the hall. A long, agonizing silence stretches. Then, I see his reflection in the dark glass of the window. A small, dry smile pulls at the corner of his mouth. It's not a smile of humor. It's a smile of deep, cold, calculating recognition. He just smiles, and I turn and walk out of the house into the cold, damp air of 3:00 a.m., 4 hours. 4 hours of gray, fitful sleep in my studio apartment, and now I'm back. 6:15 a.m., the headquarters of Meridian and Wake Holdings is a 30-story blade of glass and steel that slices the Halverton skyline. The lobby is a canyon of Italian marble, echoing with the metallic click-clack of early arrivals, their faces illuminated by the blue light of their phones. The air conditioning is already humming, locked at a precise, inhuman 67 degrees. It's a temperature designed not for comfort, but for agitation. It keeps the suits crisp and the minds sharp with a low, constant hum of discomfort. The air smells sterile, like chilled ozone and expensive. Industrial carpet cleaner. My desk is on the 39th floor. Risk analysis. We're in an open-plan synergy space, which means zero privacy and maximum visibility. On the far wall, a massive plasma screen displays our guiding principle, rendered in sleek, sans serif font. Transparency, integrity, accountability. It's all a lie. I am Clara Whitfield, Senior Risk Analyst. It sounds important. It's not. It means I'm the last line of defense before a report goes to the executives. My name is the final signature in a long chain. I'm the one who runs the final validation models, the one who checks the math. It's the perfect position for a scapegoat. If a meteor hits the building, they'll find a way to trace it to a risk assessment I signed off on. My name is on everything. It's the last name they see. When something goes wrong, it's the only name they remember. This whole nightmare started 3 days ago. Sloan Armitage, my stepmother, the CFO, called me into her corner office. The view from her window on the 44th floor makes the city look like a circuit board, inanimate and silent. "Clara," she said, not looking up from her terminal, her fingers flying across a keyboard that made almost no sound. I see a flag in the reconciliation for the Bracken Fund. I knew the fund. It was an alternative investment portfolio, notoriously opaque. Yes, I was just drafting the query. There's a 2.3% variance, a steady bleed, routed to an unverified vendor. It's not a bleed. She cut me off. The click of her mouse was sharp in the quiet. It's a discretionary reallocation. I need you to adjust the benchmark model. Reclassify the outflow as administrative overhead and success fees. Smooth it out. Smooth it out. The corporate term for make it disappear. The polite, sanitized language of felony. Sloan, I can't, I said. My voice was tight, thin in the 67-degree F air. The fund's charter doesn't allow for that classification. It's a non-compliance event. I'd have to flag it for internal audit. She finally looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, the color of the 67-degree F air, and just as cold. You are a risk analyst. Clara, this is the analysis. The risk is you making this a problem. Fix it. I can't sign off on that adjustment, I repeated. My hands were clammy. I said no. I held my ground. The text message I received at 1:17 a.m. from her was the consequence, the 7:00 a.m. meeting, the resignation letter. She isn't just trying to fire me. She's trying to discredit me. She's creating a narrative where I, the incompetent analyst, made a series of critical errors. When I'm fired, any claims I make about the Bracken Fund will be dismissed as the sour grapes of a disgruntled, failed employee. It escalated yesterday. An email, not from Sloan, but from Sloan's network. It came from an anonymous, encrypted external address. But the metadata, when I ran a trace, pinged a proxy server often used by our finance department's internal auditors, Sloan's personal attack dogs. The subject line was just, after hours. The body was simple. We see you. Stop digging. Attached was a photo. It was grainy, clearly taken with a phone from across the office. It was me, at my desk. Well, after 9:00 p.m., my hand was on the local server tower, the side panel removed. The angle made it look clandestine, suspicious, stealing data. I was just rebooting the machine after a system patch crashed my model. But context doesn't matter. The image is the threat. They're building the narrative. Clara Whitfield, the disgruntled employee, caught faking data, Bracken, and stealing data, the photo. My stomach clenches. They've been planning this. The elevator doors ding open, the sound unnaturally loud. My father, Gavin Whitfield, steps in. He's the Executive Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. It's a title so vague it means nothing. It's a title Sloan gave him after they married. A golden leash, a reward for his silence and compliance. He's holding his embossed leather briefcase. He sees me. For one terrible second, our eyes meet. I see panic in them. Quickly shuddered. He looks tired, older than his 60 years. Clara, he says, his voice a low mumble that gets lost in the hum of the elevator. Dad. He immediately turns, facing the door, his reflection staring back at us from the polished bronze. He adjusts his tie, a silk paisley I've never seen before, a gift from Sloan. He doesn't look at me again, the bruise on my cheek, which I'd carefully covered with a thick layer of concealer, suddenly feels hot, as if his avoidance is a spotlight. He knows. He must know about the 7:00 a.m. meeting. He knows Sloan is going to feed me to the wolves. The elevator stops at 42. He gets off. Dad, I say, just as the doors begin to close. He doesn't turn around. He just walks away. The doors slide shut, leaving me with my own pale, tight-lipped reflection. He is a vice president. He is my father. And he is a coward. I get to my desk on the 39th floor. My terminal is on. The calendar notification is flashing, an angry red box in the corner of my screen. Emergency meeting. Q3 audit review. 7:00 a.m. Conference room. Catalyst. This is it. The execution. The room is literally named Catalyst, the place where reactions are forced. I am the reactant to be consumed. Sloan's text message from 1:17 a.m. burns in my memory. Have your resignation ready. My second job, the cleaning at Renmore House. I took it for the money. Yes, after Sloane had optimized my salary, but that wasn't the only reason. It was an escape. Sloane and my father live in the Whitfield family penthouse, the one that should have been mine. After the restructuring, I got my own small apartment, but Sloane insisted on family dinners, mandatory appearances. The cleaning job gave me the perfect excuse. I'm so sorry. Sloane, I'm taking a night certification class for advanced econometrics. I won't be home until after midnight. It was a lie to avoid her, a lie to avoid watching my father shrink in her presence, a lie to avoid the suffocating, silent warfare of that penthouse. And that lie put me in the East Library. I sit down. The 67-degree air hits the back of my neck. My chair squeaks. And I see it. It wasn't here at 6:15 a.m. when I walked in. Someone put it here in the few minutes I was away from my desk, grabbing a bitter coffee I didn't want. A white envelope, thick, expensive cardstock, not company stationery. My name isn't on it. There's nothing on it. My heart does a slow, painful kick. Is this part of Sloane's game? A formal letter of termination before the meeting even starts? A final, theatrical twist of the knife? My fingers are trembling. I slide a fingernail under the flap. It's not sealed. Inside, there are only two things. First, a small, ornate, old-fashioned key. It's heavy, made of brass or bronze. The head shaped into a stylized, intricate letter W. Second, a small piece of paper, torn from the same thick cardstock as the envelope. The handwriting is not Sloane's. It's strong, angular, forceful, written with a heavy fountain pen that has bled slightly into the fibers of the paper. It says, East Library, 11:40 p.m. The key is cold in my palm. The W, Renmore. The old man, the man with the platinum ring, engraved with a K. The man who smiled at my desperation. 11:40 p.m. He wants to see me tonight, but by 11:40 p.m., I might not have a job. I might be under investigation by security. I might be escorted from the building by men who smell like wool suits and intimidation. No. The compressed, panicked feeling in my chest suddenly focuses. It sharpens, like a lens clicking into place. I am not a lamb for the slaughter. I am a risk analyst. I analyze threats, and I find mitigation strategies. Sloane's threat, the 7:00 a.m. meeting, her weapon, the faked narrative, the photo, the errors, her goal, my signature on a resignation letter, admitting fault. My mitigation, evidence. I reach into my bag. I pull out a standard-issue Kingston USB drive. It looks like any of the other drives on my desk, cluttered with old models and reports. But this one I prepared last night, in the server room, after Sloane struck me. After she ordered me to fix the Bracken numbers, I didn't just go back to my desk. I pulled the logs, the real logs, the ones that showed her terminal IP, her biometric login, accessing the Bracken fund accounts before she ever spoke to me, the ones that showed the exact 2.3% transfer to Northline Sanitation, my cleaning company, a shell. The logs she thinks she erased. But the system automatically creates a cached backup on a partitioned archive for 24 hours before it's sent to deep storage, a risk mitigation feature I helped design. I have the proof. Sloane wants a letter of resignation. She wants me to roll over. The anonymous email was meant to scare me. My father's silence was meant to isolate me. But the old man in the library, he listened, and now he's given me a key. A plan forms. It's desperate. It's thin as a razor's edge, but it's not nothing. Survive the next 24 hours. Step 1. Get through the 7:00 a.m. meeting. Do not sign anything. Do not admit fault. Stall. Buy time. Step 2. Find out what this key opens. Step 3. Meet the man in the East Library at 11:40 p.m. I slip the W key into my pocket. It feels heavy. Heavy as an anchor, or perhaps a weapon. I slide the USB drive into my blazer's inner pocket, zipping it shut. The small, plastic rectangle feels like a plate of armor over my heart. I look at the clock on my monitor. 6:48 a.m. I look at the slogan on the wall. Transparency, integrity, accountability. I stand up, straightening my blazer. The concealer on my cheek feels like a mask. The bruise throbs underneath, a dull, physical reminder of the stakes. "Okay, Sloan," I whisper to the empty, air-conditioned room. "You want a catalyst? Let's start the reaction." I walk toward the conference room. The 7 a.m. meeting wasn't an execution, it was a tribunal. It lasted 17 minutes. Sloan, flanked by 2 corporate lawyers, presented a deck titled Critical Inconsistencies and Control Failures. My name was on every slide. The language was cold, precise, and utterly false. They detailed unauthorized access, data misrepresentation, and failure to adhere to internal protocols. My father was there. He sat at the far end of the long glass table, his reflection staring at his other reflection in the window. He read from a prepared statement. "Given the regrettable lapse in internal controls, we believe," he never once made eye contact. "They didn't fire me. That would have been too simple, too clean. They offered me indefinite, paid administrative leave, pending a full internal investigation." It was a gag, a cage. The offer came with a thick severance and mutual separation agreement, a non-disclosure agreement that would bury me, and the truth about the Bracken Fund, forever. I told them I needed 24 hours to review the document with legal counsel. It was a lie. I have no counsel. But the lie, delivered with a passable imitation of professional calm, was enough. Sloane's eyes narrowed, but her lawyers nodded. The request was reasonable. I bought myself one more day, one more night. I didn't go home. I spent the day in the cold, cavernous reading room of the Halverton Public Library, the USB drive heavy in my pocket. I watched the clock, my blood a slurry of caffeine and adrenaline. At 10 p.m., I caught the bus, back to Renmore House, back to the service entrance. But I wasn't in my blue polo. I was still in my wrinkled office clothes, a ghost in a different machine. The grand hall was silent, the air still and heavy with beeswax. I walked to the East Library. The great double oak doors, usually left ajar for my cleaning rounds, were closed, solid, locked. My watch read 11:39 p.m. My fingers, cold and trembling, closed around the small, heavy key from the white envelope, the key engraved with a W. I've never used a key on this door. I slid it into the massive, ornate iron lock. There was no resistance. It turned with a deep, oiled, satisfying thunk that seemed to vibrate in the marble floor, the sound of permission. I pushed the door. It swung open on silent, perfectly balanced hinges. 11:40 p.m. The room was as I had always seen it, vast, dark, smelling of old paper and history. The single green-shaded lamp glowed in the distance, a lone beacon in a sea of shadows. He was there, but not in his usual place. He was sitting in the high-backed leather chair. Yes, but he had turned it to face the door. He was waiting. He was perfectly still. The polished walnut cane rested not beside him, but horizontally across his knees, like a ceremonial weapon. For the first time, I saw his face. It was older than I'd thought, etched with lines of fatigue and pain. But his eyes, they were not the vague, watery eyes of a recluse. They were bright, hawk-like, and utterly alert. They were the eyes of a man who misses nothing. I stood by the door, my silhouette framed in the dark wood. The heavy door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing in the high, book-lined ceiling. "You came." His voice rasped. It was not a question. "You knew I would," I said, my own voice sounding thin. "Your name." It was a command. I swallowed. The air felt too thick to breathe. Clara Whitfield." It happened, just as I'd seen in his reflection, but clearer now. A tightening of his jaw, a sudden, sharp flicker in his eyelids, a flash of something, recognition, anger, profound sadness, that was gone as quickly as it came. His knuckles, wrapped around the head of his cane, turned white. Whitfield. The name hung in the air between us, a shared, unspoken history. He gestured with his chin, a short, sharp movement. The accident. From the server room. My blood ran cold. He didn't just hear me last night, he knew. My hand flew to my cheek. The concealer had long since worn away, leaving the purple and yellow stain of Sloane's diamond. He reached to the desk beside him, his movements economical, and picked up a small, perfectly folded linen cloth. He held it out. "For your cheek." I stepped forward, into the small, warm pool of the lamp's light. My hand was shaking as I took the cloth. It was crisp, clean, and smelled of starch. Not flowers. A strange, antiseptic comfort. As I took it, my eyes fell to his desk. It was immaculate. A heavy black fountain pen rested in a silver holder. On its gleaming clip, I saw the engraving, a simple, strong script. H.K. Beside it, a small, intricate silver frame. The photograph within it was turned face down on the desk. "She's good," he said, his voice a low growl. "Sloane Armitage. She's been siphoning funds for 18 months. She used your night job, Northline Sanitation, as the primary pass-through, a brilliant piece of camouflage. But she got greedy with the Bracken Fund." I stopped breathing. He knew everything. "And you," he continued, his eyes boring into mine, "were the analyst who wouldn't be smoothed, the one who said no." He knew about the server room. He knew about the 7 a.m. meeting. "They put you on leave today," he stated. "Offered you a separation agreement, a bribe, wrapped in a threat." How do you know this?" "This house," he gestured to the walls, "has been my listening post." "They're trapping me," I whispered, the words finally coming out. The realization was suffocating. The leave isn't a reprieve, it's a box. They're waiting for me to go home. "They are," he confirmed, his voice flat. "Security, they won't let you become a whistleblower. They'll wait for you at your apartment, and they will secure company assets, your laptop, your phone, and the USB drive you have in your pocket." I flinched, my hand instinctively moving to my blazer. "They have to," he said. "You're the only loose end, you and the logs you copied from the server archive." "So what do I do?" My voice was desperate. "I have the proof. I have the logs." "Your logs are useless," he countered, sharply. "Proof is nothing without power. If you present them, they will claim you fabricated them. They will bury you in litigation until you are dust. No, you don't go home, and you don't use your logs." He leaned forward. The green light of the lamp cast deep shadows in the lines of his face. "They will call one more meeting. They have to finalize your termination with cause, to legally discredit you before you can speak. They will do it in the catalyst room. They will have their lawyers. They will present their own evidence, a complete fabrication." He paused, letting the words sink in. "My advice, Clara Whitfield, do not defend yourself. Do not argue. Let them lie. Let them build their entire fraudulent case, brick by brick, on the record, and you," his voice dropped, "will record it." He tapped the walnut cane on the floor, thud. "This cane," he said, lifting it slightly, "is not just wood. It's a scanner, a transmitter, a network proxy. It has been my key to the systems they all believe are secure. It's how I read the email about your 7 a.m. meeting. It's how I read the text Sloane sent you from her secure device." The small, green dot at the tip glowed faintly. "This house is wired, but so is their boardroom." He reached into the pocket of his waistcoat. He pulled out a key. It was not the W key I had used for the door. This one was flat, modern, made of serrated steel, a high-security safe key. He placed it in my open palm. His skin was dry and warm, the key cold and sharp. "The housekeeper's room," he said, his voice low and urgent. "On the ground floor, west wing, behind the large painting of the white crane." My heart was hammering against my ribs. "When the time comes, you open it," he commanded. Not before. I closed my fingers around the key. It felt heavy, dangerous. Who are you? He looked at me, and for a second, the iron-hard control in his face softened. It was replaced by a deep, ancient weariness. I am Harlan Kellen, he said, and I am the man who owned Meridian and Wake before your father and his wife stole it from my daughter. My mother. I stumbled back, the name hitting me like a physical blow. I turned, yanking the heavy door open, and fled into the hall. The click of the lock behind me was deafening. I stood in the cold marble silence of the great hall, my mind reeling. And then I heard it. A sound muffled by the thick oak door. A sound he must have been holding in. A sound he would never have let me see. A dry, hacking cough. It was not a simple clearing of the throat. It was a deep, ragged, painful sound, ripped from his lungs, the sound of a man who was suppressing more than just secrets, the sound of a man running out of time. His cough, a ragged, desperate sound, followed me down the corridor. It was the sound of a lock breaking. I stood frozen in the center of the great hall, the ice-like light of the chandelier mocking me with its coldness. My mind was a white-hot static. He didn't just know about my mother. He said my father and Sloane stole the company from his daughter. Eleanor, my mother. It wasn't a metaphor. It was an accusation. I couldn't breathe. I had to know. He gave me the key. He told me where to go. Housekeeper's room, west wing, behind the crane. I didn't walk. I ran. My worn office heels made no sound on the priceless, ancient runners. I moved through the silent, opulent tomb of a house, a ghost with a purpose. The west wing was dark. The door marked housekeeper was unlocked. I pushed it open. It wasn't a closet. It was a small, neat office, the air smelling of lavender furniture polish and old, organized files. It was empty, of course. My eyes immediately found it, on the far wall, a large, ornate oil painting of a single white crane, its wings spread, landing in a patch of dark reeds. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the heavy, gilded frame. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, and it swung forward on silent, well-oiled hinges, revealing a square of cold black steel set into the wall, a safe, not a digital one, but an old high-security model with a single deep keyhole. My hand went to the pocket of my blazer. I had the W key from the envelope, the key that had opened the library. I had thought that was its only purpose. Renmore, Whitfield, West Wing. I slid the heavy, intricate brass key, the W key, into the lock. It was not a modern fit. It was deep, turning past tumblers with a series of solid, heavy, mechanical clicks. It was the sound of a vault. The key fit perfectly. A final, satisfying thunk, and the small, heavy door sprang open. The inside was lined with dark, worn velvet. It smelled of steel and dry, old paper. It was full. My fingers, trembling, pulled out the first item, a thick, blue-bound document. Meridian and Wake Holdings, the cover read, Shareholder Voting Trust Agreement. I flipped to the signature page. My blood ran cold. The agreement assigned 18% of all outstanding common shares to a single trustee. The name printed on the line was Harlan Kingsley. Kingsley? Not Kellen. Who was Kingsley? Beneath the trust was a photograph, its edges curled with age. My breath caught in my throat. It was my mother. She was younger than I'd ever seen her, in her early 20s, her hair long and wild, squinting against a bright sun. Her arm was linked through the arm of a tall, dark-haired man. He was smiling, his face sharp and intense. He was a stranger. Until I saw his hand. On his fourth finger, he wore a wide, unmistakable platinum ring, the one engraved with the deep, Gothic K. It was him, the man from the library, 30 years younger. My eyes darted to the next item in the safe, a single sheet of thick ivory cardstock, identical to the one that came with the key, the same bold, angular, fountain pen handwriting. It wasn't a letter, it was a note, If you are Eleanor's daughter, you will know we practiced your name for hours. You always insisted on writing Whitfield with the T drawn out, a long, defiant line, just like mine. Your signature is your proof. A memory, sharp and violent, pierced my consciousness. Me, age 7, at a small kitchen table, my mother guiding my hand. No, Clara, the T isn't a cross. It's a sword. Stretch it out. Show them you mean it. A quirk of penmanship I'd kept my entire life, a habit, a secret handshake, across time. Beneath the note was a thin, legal folded document, a certified copy, the seal embossed and dry. Petition for legal change of name. My eyes scanned the text. The undersigned, Harlan Kingsley, residing at, does hereby petition the court to change his legal name to Harlan Kellen. H. K. The pen on his desk. K. The ring. Kingsley. Kellen. My heart wasn't just pounding, it was exploding, a chaotic, painful, unmanageable rhythm in my chest. The old man, the anonymous tenant, the man I'd confessed my desperation to. He is Harlan Kingsley. He is Harlan Kellen. He is my grandfather. The man who had owned Meridian and Wake. The man my father stole it from. The company Sloan was now gutting. His words from the library echoed, suddenly amplified. Tomorrow. Don't defend yourself. Let them lie. And you will record it. I ripped my backpack from my shoulder. I had the USB drive with the real server logs. That was my proof. But he didn't want my proof. He wanted their confession. I pulled out my meeting pen, the sleek black digital recorder I'd bought myself last year, paranoid about Sloan twisting my words in performance reviews. It looked like a simple, expensive fountain pen. I clicked the top, a single. Pinprick-sized blue light on the clip flashed once, then went dark. It was active, recording. I slid it into the outer breast pocket of my blazer, the microphone grill facing out. One last sheaf of papers lay at the bottom of the safe. They were stapled, marked with red ink in the margins. Last Will and Testament, the cover page read. Draft, H. Kellen. I forced my shaking hands to turn the page. Scanning the dense legalese, I found it. Article 4. Article 4. Conditional bequest of voting rights. In the event of my death, all voting rights associated with my 18% stake in Meridian and Wake Holdings shall be immediately and irrevocably transferred to my granddaughter, Clara Eleanor Whitfield. My name, my full name. This transfer is conditional upon the express condition that she provide, within 30 days of my passing, verifiable, documented proof of gross mismanagement or criminal fraud perpetrated by the current executive board, specifically Sloan Armitage or Gavin Whitfield. It wasn't a will, it was a fail-safe. It was a trap, baited with 18% of the company. He's been here, in this house, watching, listening, and waiting. Waiting for Sloan to get greedy. Waiting for me to be in the right place, at the right time. Waiting for the daughter of Eleanor to fight back. I swept everything. The voting trust, the photograph, the handwritten note, the draft of the will, into my backpack. I zipped it shut. I closed the heavy safe door. The sound a final, metallic clack. I swung the painting of the crane back into place. It settled with a soft thud. It was done. I had to see him. I had to ask him, what? Why did you abandon us? Is it true? I ran back to the East Library. My hand, still holding the W key, slid it into the lock and turned. The heavy door swung open. The room was empty. He was gone. The green-shaded lamp was off. The high-backed leather chair was turned back toward the desk. But he wasn't in it. The desk was clear. The H. pen was gone. The upturned photograph was gone. He had vanished as if he were never there. I reached for the heavy, brass doorknob on the inside of the door. It was cold, but as my fingers closed around it, a tiny, faint green light in the mechanism blinked once, an afterimage of the technology in his cane, before fading to black. He was just here. He knew I'd been to the safe. He knew I would come back. And he knew he must not be here when I did. The signal was clear. The time for hiding in the library was over. The time for questions was over. It was time to act. I stepped out into the grand hall. I looked up at the tall, black windows. The drizzle over Halverton had finally broken. The wind howled, and the rain was no longer a mist. It was a deluge, lashing against the glass, a furious, cleansing sound. The storm was here. I didn't sleep. After fleeing the library, I didn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't. Harlan's words, his cough, the revelation of the will. It was a new, toxic adrenaline that burned away any trace of exhaustion. I spent the remaining hours of the night in the back of a 24-hour diner. The smell of stale coffee and bleach, a strange comfort. I drank cup after cup, my backpack sitting on the vinyl seat beside me, a bomb filled with voting trusts and photographs. At 7:50 a.m., I walked into the lobby of Meridian and Wake Holdings. I was still wearing yesterday's wrinkled blazer. My hair was pulled back into a tight, severe knot. I had made a choice. I wiped away the thick concealer I had so carefully applied 24 hours earlier. The bruise on my cheekbone was now a sick, mottled tapestry of yellow, purple, and green. I wanted them to see it. I wanted it to be on the record. The Catalyst conference room was on the 44th floor, the executive floor. It was a glass box, designed to project an illusion of transparency, when in reality it was a fishbowl. The air was chilled to its precise 67 degrees. Sloane was already there, at the head of the long obsidian glass table. She was flanked by two men I recognized, Mr. Graves, the company's general counsel, and a younger, shark-eyed man from his team. They were the architects of my execution. And at the far end of the table, staring into a glass of water as if it held the answers to the universe, was my father, Gavin Whitfield. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He looked small. I took the only remaining seat, directly opposite Sloane. The pen recorder, which I had activated in the elevator, was a cool, familiar weight in my breast pocket. The high-definition ceiling-mounted camera, which recorded every meeting in this room for compliance purposes, hummed silently above us. Its red light was on. We were on the record. 8:02 a.m. Sloane did not say good morning. She tapped the integrated touchscreen in front of her. The massive 8K monitor that comprised the entire far wall lit up. The slide was simple, brutalist, and rendered in the company's proprietary Meridian Sans font. Subject: Internal Control Incident and Data Breach. C. Whitfield. My name, 10 feet high, under a heading that was corporate speak for criminal. Thank you all for attending this urgent review, Sloane began. Her voice was a masterpiece of cold, professional regret. As you know, we placed Ms. Whitfield on administrative leave yesterday pending a full investigation. That investigation is now complete. She nodded to Mr. Graves. He stood up, his suit jacket unbuttoned. He was a performer. At 6:15 p.m., 2 days ago, Graves began, his voice a dry, practiced monotone. Ms. Whitfield was observed gaining unauthorized access to the 44th floor server room. He clicked a button. The grainy, damning photo from the anonymous email filled the screen. Me, my back to a camera I didn't know existed, my hand on the open server panel. This breach of protocol, he continued, pacing slowly, coincides exactly with the detection of significant data manipulation within the Q3 reconciliation of the Bracken Fund. He was good. He was brilliant. He was taking her crime and my discovery and weaving them into a single, seamless narrative of my guilt. The internal log review shows Ms. Whitfield, as the final analyst on the validation chain, had complete control over this report. It is our finding that she used this position to create the anomalies, and then, upon realizing an audit was imminent, attempted to erase her digital footprint by physically accessing the server hardware. A lie, a perfect, polished, devastating lie. The motive? Graves paused, a small, theatrical shrug. We have on record that Ms. Whitfield was Profoundly dissatisfied with the recent company-wide salary optimizations. A clear case of a disgruntled employee attempting to inflict financial and reputational damage. He had built the cage. He sat down. I just sat there. I let the silence hang. I let the 67-degree F air dry my palms. I felt the tiny digital recorder against my ribs. Let them lie. Let them build their entire fraudulent case. Harlan's words. Sloane took over, her voice shifting to one of pained disappointment. Clara, this is, frankly, a tragedy. You had potential. But this is a willful, malicious act of sabotage, a felony. She slid a thick document, bound in a fresh blue cover, across the glass table. It stopped perfectly, an inch from my fingers. This is a revised separation agreement, she said. We are, against the very strong advice of our legal counsel, prepared to be lenient. I read the new cover sheet. Admission of error and mutual resignation agreement. You sign this, Sloane said, her voice dropping to a low, intimate promise. You admit to gross analytical negligence and willful protocol breach. In return, we will waive criminal prosecution for the data tampering. You walk away. You keep your vested 401k. It is the only way to mitigate the damage to your future. Sign it, Clara. Acknowledge what you did. This was the checkmate. This was the trap. My signature, admitting fault, would render the real server logs in my backpack, my actual proof, completely inadmissible. It would be my word against my own signed confession. I looked at Sloane. I looked at Mr. Graves. I looked at my father, who was now rubbing his temple, his eyes squeezed shut, as if he could will himself out of existence. I let the silence stretch. 1 beat, 2, 3. I didn't touch the document. I looked past Sloane, at Mr. Graves. My voice, when it came, was steady. It didn't even sound like mine. It sounded cold, like the room. That's a fascinating and creative narrative, Mr. Graves, I said. But you seem to have overlooked a key provision in the company's founding articles of incorporation. Graves, who had been sipping his water, paused. His cup hovered. This was not in his script. Sloane's eyes narrowed to slits. Clara, this is not a negotiation. I'm referring, I continued, cutting her off, my voice as sharp and flat as the glass table, to Article 4, specifically Section 4.3, the clause pertaining to the rights of a principal trust holder, the one that supersedes standard quorum rules and grants the power to call an immediate, emergency shareholder meeting. A confused, electric silence filled the room. My father's eyes snapped open. He knew the bylaws. His face went from sallow to the color of ash. What in God's name are you talking about? Sloane snapped, her mask of composure slipping. That's a defunct clause. It refers to the Kingsley Trust. That trust was dissolved 25 years ago. Was it? I asked. I tilted my head, an expression of mild curiosity. My understanding is that a voting trust is irrevocable until the death of the primary trustee or the fulfillment of its original terms. I don't believe Harlan Kingsley is dead. He is not. The voice came from the door. It was not loud. It was a dry, paper-rough rasp, but it cut through the room like a razor. The heavy smoked glass doors of the catalyst room slid open. He stood there, Harlan Kellen, my grandfather. He was not the stooped, shadowed recluse from the library. He was transformed. He wore a dark, perfectly tailored three-piece suit of a cut that was 30 years old and yet timeless. His silver-white hair was combed back. His eyes, those bright, hawk-like eyes, were burning. He stepped from the carpet of the hallway onto the marble floor of the conference room. He leaned on his walnut cane. Thud. The sound of the polished wood hitting the stone was not loud, but it was definitive. It was the sound of ownership. Thud. He walked, slowly, deliberately, to the head of the table. The room was frozen. The two lawyers stared, their mouths literally open. Sloane's face had gone perfectly, beautifully blank with shock. My father made a small, strangled noise. "Harlan," he whispered. "The name a ghost." "Gavin," Harlan said, his voice a cold dismissal. He did not look at him. The buzz started. The whispers. "Who is that?" "That's Kellen, the original founder. I thought he was dead. I thought he was in a facility in Switzerland." Harlan ignored them all. He reached the head of the table, standing directly opposite Sloane. He placed one hand, the one with the worn platinum K-ring, flat on the glass. With his other hand, he reached into his suit jacket and pulled out the blue-bound document from the safe. He threw it onto the table. It landed in front of Sloane with a heavy final smack. "The Kingsley Voting Trust," Harlan announced, his voice filling the room. "Undissolved, unchanged, irrevocable, representing 18% of this company's outstanding common shares." He tapped the cover with a single, long finger, and containing, as Ms. Whitfield so correctly noted, the non-negotiable right to call an emergency meeting of the board and all shareholders, effective immediately. My father looked like he was going to be sick. Sloane was staring at the document as if it were a snake. Her mask didn't just crack. It shattered. Her face was a rigid, pale mask of fury. She reached for her glass of water. Her hand was shaking so violently that the glass clicked against her teeth, water spilling over her fingers and onto the table. She slammed it down. This is a stunt," she hissed, her voice a half-octave too high. "This is procedural theater. This document is invalid. This man he's senile. He's incompetent." "My cognitive health is not on trial today, Ms. Armitage," Harlan said, his voice lethally calm. "Your accounting is—" Sloane's head whipped toward me, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated venom. "This is your doing, this pathetic, last-ditch. You brought this fossil here to distract from the fact that you were caught. You confessed." "I confessed to nothing," I said, my voice clear and loud. "You were ordered!" she shrieked, the raw, unfiltered fury finally breaking through. "You were ordered to fix the numbers, and you refused. You were insubordinate." "Ordered?" I asked, leaning forward into the electric space between us. "Ordered by whom? Sloane?" "By me! You entitled idiot!" she screamed, her voice echoing in the glass box. "I am the CFO. I told you to smooth out the Bracken Fund flow, and you brought this circus." The room was dead silent. The lawyers were pale. The red light on the ceiling camera was on, and the recorder in my pocket was running. I reached very slowly into my blazer. I pulled out the sleek black digital pen. I clicked the top, and I placed it in the center of the obsidian glass table. "Play," I commanded. The pen's tiny, powerful speaker filled the room. First, my voice, tinny and strained from 2 days ago. "Sloane, I can't. The fund's charter doesn't allow for that classification. It's a non-compliance event. I'd have to flag it." And then, Sloane's voice, cold, clear, and utterly unmistakable. "Click. You are a risk analyst. Clara, this is the analysis. The risk is you making this a problem. Fix it." I pressed the button again, and the recording from 10 seconds ago played. "By me, you entitled idiot. I am the CFO. I told you to smooth out the Bracken Fund flow." The blood drained from Sloane's face. "Mr. Graves," the general counsel, slowly, deliberately, closed his leather notebook. He knew it was over. The atmosphere in the room didn't just change, it inverted. The 67° F air was suddenly suffocating, thick as water. The catalyst room had finally lived up to its name. The reaction was irreversible. The chaos in the catalyst room was immediate. Lawyers were whispering. Sloane was staring at the digital recorder as if it were a live grenade, and my father was a statue of gray ash. Harlan Kellen raised his hand. The room, miraculously, fell silent. "Mr. Graves," Harlan said, his voice cutting through the chilled air. "This meeting, this tribunal, is adjourned. It is hereby reconvened, under Article 4.3 in 1 hour, at Renmore House. Sloane sprang to life, her voice a low, furious hiss. You can't do that. This is a corporate headquarters. You can't move a board meeting to a private residence. It's procedural madness. It is not, Harlan countered, tapping the blue-bound voting trust. It is a shareholder meeting. My 18% calls for it, and Renmore House is not a private residence. It is the founding asset of this company. It is the Renmore in Meridian and Wake. We are going there, as I stated, to conduct a full inventory of family assets. I suggest you attend. He turned and walked out. The thud of his cane on the marble was the only sound. The next hour was a blur of contained panic. A fleet of black, unmarked cars, sent by Harlan, idled in the corporate plaza. I rode with him. I sat in the plush leather seat, my cheap backpack on my lap, a chasm of silence between us. I could feel the weight of the photograph, the will, the trust. Sloane, my father, and the lawyers took a separate car. I saw her through the tinted glass, her face a mask of cold fury, her phone pressed to her ear, no doubt trying to summon legal countermeasures that she now knew would be too late. My father sat beside her, staring blankly, a man already hollowed out. We arrived at Renmore, in the gray, unforgiving morning light. The house looked less like a home and more like a fortress, a citadel of old money and old secrets. The great hall, the room I had scrubbed on my hands and knees, was transformed. It was a theater. Rows of dark mahogany chairs faced the massive baronial fireplace, where a 500-year-old Flemish tapestry usually hung. There was now a seamless, cinema-quality projection screen. The room was set for a performance. Sloane, my father, and the two lawyers filed in. They looked small, swallowed by the soaring, vaulted ceiling and the ancient, judging portraits on the walls. They took seats in the front row, a tight, poisoned knot. Harlan Kellen stood before the fireplace, at home, in his power. He was no longer the frail tenant of the library. He was the master of the house. He leaned his walnut cane against the stone hearth. "Welcome," he said. The acoustics of the hall carried his voice, making it sound like a judgment. "Welcome to the emergency shareholders meeting of Meridian and Wake. Thank you for coming. We are here, Ms. Armitage, to address your critical inconsistencies and control failures." He nodded to me. "Clara, if you would." All eyes turned. To me, the analyst in the wrinkled suit, the night cleaner, the girl with the bruised face. I stood and walked to the front. My backpack felt impossibly heavy. "Yesterday," I said, my voice steady, "this board was presented with a narrative. Today, I'd like to present the reality." Harlan tapped a small, discreet remote on the mantel. The giant screen flickered to life. It was not a PowerPoint slide. It was a video. Grainy, dark, filmed from a high angle. The server room. "That's inadmissible," Graves, the lawyer, sputtered, half rising. "There are no cameras in the server room. It's a high-security protocol." "You are correct, Mr. Graves," Harlan said, his voice smooth as chilled steel. "There are no cameras in the room, but the polished, convex surface of the main server rack, well, it provides a very interesting reflection." The video played. We saw my back. We saw Sloane's face, contorted. We heard my voice, tinny. "I can't sign off on that adjustment." And then we saw it. The flash of her diamond ring, her hand, lashing out, the crack as it connected with my face. We saw me stumble back, my hand flying to my cheek. A low, sick sound came from the back of the room. My father had his eyes closed. Sloane was rigid, her face white as the marble floor. "Sloane," I said, my voice echoing in the hall. "I believe the technical term you used was lotai, a slip of the hand." I touched the mottled, purple bruise on my own cheek. "A physical audit." "That's doctored," she hissed. "It's a fabrication." "It's a time-stamped compliance recording from the adjacent hallway's dome camera, zoomed and clarified," Harlan said. Now, for the data tampering you were so concerned about. The screen changed. It was an email from S. Armitage at meridianwake.com to accounts at Northline Sanitation. Com. Subject Q3 Bracken Reconciliation. The 2.3% Bracken transfer is confirmed. Classify as specialized maintenance and logistics per our agreement. Disperse funds to the attached holding account. The account number flashed on the screen. Northline Sanitation, Harlan said, pacing slowly. A company that, according to Delaware state records, has one client, Meridian and Wake, one service, and one mailing address, a shell. It is also, by a remarkable coincidence, the company that employs my granddaughter, Clara Whitfield, to clean this very house. The screen changed again. A new set of documents, invoices, dozens of them, from Northline Sanitation, billed to Meridian and Wake. All for executive and specialized night cleaning services at Renmore House, I said, stepping forward. Tens of thousands of dollars per month. I pointed to the screen. These invoices, for work I supposedly did, line up perfectly with my actual timesheets, the ones I submitted for minimum wage. Harlan tapped the remote. The screen zoomed in. It focused on the bottom of the invoices, on the signature line that authorized the massive, fraudulent payments. The signature was looping, frantic, and unmistakable. G. Whitfield. Sloane, who had been staring at the screen, whipped her head to look at my father. It was a look of pure, reptilian contempt. He was no longer her ally. He was her liability. He was shaking. His face was slick with sweat. Gavin? Harlan's voice was soft, almost kind, which made it all the more brutal. Would you like to explain your signature? Authorizing payments from the company you serve to the shell company your wife owns for work you never verified? My father sprang from his chair. The movement was so violent it knocked the chair over. It was just to cover a gap, he screamed, his voice cracking, breaking against the high, vaulted ceiling. A temporary gap. She said it was just a bridge, to cover the margin call on the Hong Kong portfolio. It was just temporary, she promised. The confession, raw and desperate, hung in the air. It was fatal. Sloane didn't even look at him. She rose from her chair, her back straight, her composure a terrifying, cold mask. She stared at Harlan. You have no proof, she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. This is a family spat. This is slander. You can't prove any of this to the real shareholders. This is just a pathetic home movie. Harlan smiled, a thin, cold, terrible smile. But I am proving it, my dear. I am. He reached for his walnut cane. He lifted it, and he tapped it on the marble floor. 3 distinct, rhythmic taps. Thud, thud, thud. A single bright green light pulsed from the head of the cane, illuminating his hand. As of my declaration of this emergency meeting, Harlan announced, his voice booming in the hall, a secured, encrypted live stream of this inventory was sent to every principal shareholder, every minor shareholder, and for good measure, the Compliance Division of the SEC and the Southern District of New York. He gestured to a dark, discreet dome camera high in the ceiling rafters. The security system in this house, my dear Sloane, is far superior to yours. This was it, my cue. I walked past my father, who had collapsed back into his chair. I walked past the frozen, ashen-faced lawyers. I walked past Sloane, who was staring at the camera as if she could will it to burst into flames. I walked to the wall beside the great fireplace, to a spot that had always looked like a simple, carved oak panel. I pushed my hand against the carving. With a soft hiss of hydraulics, the panel retracted. It revealed a square of black steel, the exact same safe door I had seen in the housekeeper's room, the W glinting in the light. You think this is just about money, I said to the room. I pulled the heavy W key from my pocket. I slid it into the lock. The same heavy mechanical clicks echoed in the silent room. I turned the key. I pulled the heavy door open. The shareholders on the live stream, and the monsters in this room, saw inside. I didn't reach for the voting trust. I didn't reach for the will. I reached for the photograph, the one of my mother, Eleanor, young and smiling, her arm linked with a young Harlan Kingsley. I placed it on the table, face up, in front of my father. Then, I pulled out the draft of the will, the one linking 18% of the company to the proof of their fraud. I placed it on top of the picture. Harlan Kellen stepped up beside me. He looked at me, and his face, for a fleeting second, was not the face of a corporate warrior. It was the face of a grandfather. "My daughter, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with a grief he had held for decades. "Spent her life bowing. She bowed to her husband. She bowed to circumstance." He glanced at my father, a look of searing contempt. "She bowed to cowards." He looked back at me. His eyes were bright. "Eleanor's daughter," he said, his voice clear and strong, "does not bow." I met his gaze. I felt the weight of my mother's memory. I felt the heat of Sloane's hatred. I felt the cold, empty space where my father's integrity should have been. I straightened my back, I lifted my chin, and I looked every single one of them in the eye. The camera in the rafters, a small, dark, impassive eye, was broadcasting my face, my grandfather's face, and the complete, catastrophic disintegration of Sloane Armitage's composure. Mr. Graves, the general counsel, was the first to recover. He was a creature of procedure, and in the absence of a winning argument, he grasped for a losing one. "This is not a meeting," he declared, his voice attempting a boom that was immediately swallowed by the ancient oak of the hall. "This is a performance, a farce. This live stream is an illegal dissemination of confidential corporate information. This entire proceeding is invalid, and we will move to have it." "This is not a farce, Mr. Graves," Harlan Kellen cut him off. His voice wasn't loud, but it was absolute. "It is a legally convened emergency meeting of the shareholders of Meridian and Wake Holdings, invoked under Article 4.3 of the Founding Charter, which you have clearly failed to read. As for confidential information, the fraud perpetrated by your CFO and EVP is now a matter of public record." He turned, not to the people in the room, but to the camera, addressing the void. "To all shareholders, partners, and regulatory bodies present on this secured stream, we are now in formal session. The purpose of this session is a vote of no confidence and a motion for the immediate removal of Miss Sloane Armitage and Mr. Gavin Whitfield for gross negligence, conspiracy to commit fraud, and misappropriation of corporate assets. Ms. Clara Whitfield, the analyst who uncovered this conspiracy, will now present the formal evidence." He nodded to me. The torch was passed. I stepped forward. I had my backpack at my feet. I unzipped it, not as a panicked analyst, but as a prosecutor. I pulled out the slim black digital recorder. I pulled out the Kingston USB drive. "I submit 3 articles of evidence for the record," I stated. My voice was amplified by a small microphone I hadn't seen, clipped to the mantelpiece. "Article 1, I held up the USB drive. "The complete, unmodified server logs from the 44th floor archive. These logs show, at 6:17 p.m. on October 25th, Ms. Sloane Armitage's terminal, using her biometric login, authorizing the 2.3% transfer from the Bracken Fund to the shell entity Northline Sanitation. This was before my alleged data breach, which you saw her perpetrate on my face." Harlan tapped his remote. The video of Sloane striking me was replaced by the raw, green-on-black text of the server log, the incriminating lines highlighted in red. "Article 2. I laid out one of the Northline invoices I had retrieved from the safe. The fraudulent invoices from Northline Sanitation, billing Meridian and Wake for specialized maintenance. These invoices, totaling over $3 million in the last 2 quarters, were authorized for payment by one person." Harlan hit the remote again. The screen zoomed to the bottom of the invoice, to the looping, frantic signature of G. Whitfield. "And Article 3, I finished, holding up the pen. The audio recording you have all just heard, where CFO Armitage confirms, in her own words, that she ordered me to smooth out the Bracken Fund flow and fix the numbers. I placed the 3 items on the thick, carved oak table. The narrative is simple. Sloane Armitage stole the money. Gavin Whitfield signed the checks to cover her theft, and when I found it, they conspired to frame me to silence me. A new window popped up on the screen, a live chat feed. Harlan glanced at it. My assistant is monitoring the feedback from the shareholder stream, he announced. The Callaway Group, holding a 4% stake, demands an immediate independent forensic audit. The Public Teachers Pension Fund Alliance, holding 7%, seconds the motion. The motion passes. An independent auditor will be appointed by end of day. Sloane had recovered. Her shock had been replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. She stepped forward, standing beside Graves. "This is still invalid," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "This entire show hinges on his power." She pointed a shaking finger at Harlan. "The Kingsley Trust, Mr. Graves?" Graves, taking his cue, stepped up. "The Kingsley Trust," he read from his phone, clearly having had his team scrambling, "was superseded by the corporate restructuring of 2005. It's a defunct, legacy document. It holds no voting power. It is a relic. We will file an injunction within the hour. This meeting, this vote, is null and void." Sloane smiled. It was a terrible, thin-lipped expression. "He's a senile old man, rattling a saber he doesn't have. This document," she sneered at the blue-bound trust, "is worthless." Harlan Kellen watched her performance with an almost bored placidity. "A relic, Mr. Graves?" Harlan said. "You are confusing old with ironclad. You are correct. The 2005 restructuring attempted to dissolve all founding trusts, but it failed." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a second, much thinner document. He slid it across the table. It stopped in front of Graves. "This," Harlan said, "is the notarized certification and refiling of the Kingsley Voting Trust with the state of Delaware. You will note the date. It was re-ratified 364 days ago. I have been waiting patiently for this occasion. The embossed seal is, I assure you, quite fresh. Your injunction will fail. My 18% stands." Graves picked up the paper. His face, already pale, turned the color of old parchment. He knew he was beaten on the law. And that's when my father broke. He was looking at the items I had taken from the safe, the photo of his young wife, the draft of the will. He saw the legal, financial, and personal walls closing in. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet with a sudden, desperate panic. Clara, no," he stammered, his hands twisting in front of him. "You don't understand. You don't know the whole story. Your mother—" His voice dropped to a choked whisper. "Eleanor. She never wanted this. She hated this world. She hated the company. She was a gentle woman. All she wanted was peace. She wouldn't want you to do this. Not this." It was the most pathetic, most enraging thing he could have said. He was using her memory, his false memory of her, as a shield. "Peace?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Is that what you call this? You wanted peace so badly you let Sloane run this company into the ground? You wanted peace, so you signed fraudulent checks? You wanted peace, so you sat in that boardroom yesterday and read a script to have me professionally executed? You stood by and watched her hit me, all for peace?" I shook my head, a cold, final clarity washing over me. "You're right, Dad. I didn't understand. I didn't understand how you could let this happen. But I do now. And you're wrong about her. She wasn't gentle. She was just trapped." I reached back into my backpack. I pulled out the last item from the safe. The single, ivory-colored sheet of cardstock. The handwritten note. "She knew you," I said, my voice like ice. "She knew what you were. She knew. One day, someone would need this." I didn't put it on the table. I held it up for him, for the camera. to see, the bold, angular handwriting. "She taught me to sign my name," I said. "A quirk. I thought it was a game." I read from the note, my voice unwavering. "If you are Eleanor's daughter, you will know. We practiced your name for hours. You always insisted on writing Whitfield with the T drawn out. A long, defiant line, just like mine. Your signature is your proof." I lowered the note and looked at my father. His face was a mask of utter devastation. "She wasn't preparing me for peace, Dad," I whispered, the words striking him harder than Sloane's hand had struck me. "She was arming me for you." The emotional drama was over. The execution began. "We will now vote," Harlan Kellen announced, his voice a hammer. "Motion 1. The immediate removal of Sloane Armitage from the board of directors and from her position as chief financial officer, effective immediately, for cause." He looked at the camera. "The Kingsley Trust, holding 18%, votes aye." He glanced at the feed on the screen. "The Callaway Group, 4%, votes aye. The Public Teachers Pension Fund Alliance, 7%, votes aye. The Singapore Maritime Group, 11%, votes aye." He didn't need to continue. The smaller shareholders, watching the live stream, were a cascade. "With 40% of voting shares accounted for," Harlan declared, "and a wave of proxies from the live stream confirming a simple majority, the motion passes. Ms. Armitage, you are removed." Sloane didn't scream. She didn't argue. She stood up. Her face was a sculpture of pure, cold hatred. She picked up her bag. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers," she whispered, "not to Harlan, but to me." "I look forward to it," I replied. She turned and walked out of the great hall. The sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor was sharp, and then gone. Harlan didn't pause. Motion 2. The immediate suspension of Gavin Whitfield from all executive duties and from his seat on the board, pending the full, binding results of the forensic audit. He looked at my father, who had slumped into his chair, a hollowed-out man. "The Kingsley Trust votes aye," Harlan said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "The motion passes. Gavin, you are suspended." My father didn't move. He just stared at the photograph of my mother, his hand trembling over it. A power vacuum now filled the room. The two remaining lawyers, Graves and his younger associate, were silent, their mandate and their masters gone. Harlan Kellen looked at the wreckage. He looked at the camera. He looked at my father. Then, finally, he looked at me. I stood there, my hand still resting on my mother's handwritten note. I was the night cleaner. I was the risk analyst. I was the girl with the bruised face. "We have a company with no CFO and a suspended EVP of initiatives," Harlan stated to the camera. "We have a $3 million hole in the books and an imminent forensic audit. We require a temporary interim controller to oversee this transition, to cooperate with the auditors, and to stabilize the financials." He paused. I thought he would nominate himself. "Ms. Whitfield, Clara," he said. I met his gaze. It was not the gaze of a grandfather. It was the gaze of a chairman. "You found the fraud. You preserved the evidence. You understand the books better than anyone in this room." His voice was a flat, direct command. "You will run the transition." This was it, the moment. I felt the eyes of the camera. I felt the weight of the shareholders on the live stream. I felt the dead, broken gaze of my father. I took a breath. I thought my voice would shake. I thought I would cry. I didn't. I turned to the camera, speaking to the hundreds of unseen, panicked shareholders. "My name is Clara Whitfield," I said, my voice clear and loud, echoing in the great hall. "The audit begins immediately. We will find every dollar. From this moment on, there will be full, real-time transparency." I had never spoken like that before. I had never spoken with any authority at all. My voice didn't waver. I turned from the camera and looked at the surviving lawyer. "Mr. Graves." "Mr. Graves," I said. It was not a request. You will assemble the entire risk and finance teams in the Catalyst boardroom in 30 minutes. You will instruct them to give me full, unrestricted, top-level access to all custodial accounts, all trade logs, and all executive servers. Now, Mr. Graves, the general counsel, looked as though he had swallowed acid. His face, a mask of professional poise, had collapsed into a ruin of slack-jawed disbelief. He gave me a single, jerky nod, a purely mechanical acknowledgement of his new chain of command. "I will assemble the teams," he said, his voice a dry rustle. He turned, collected his younger, wide-eyed associate, and walked out of the great hall. He did not run, but his pace was urgent. He was a man fleeing the rubble of a fallen building. Harlan Kellen watched him go. He reached for his walnut cane, his knuckles white. With a small, deliberate movement, he touched the head of the cane. The small, green light that had been pulsing a steady, silent rhythm went dark. The live stream was over. The connection to the outside world was severed. The silence that descended was profound. It was no longer the electric, tense quiet of a boardroom confrontation. It was a heavy, ancient silence, thick with dust motes and unsaid words. There were only 3 people left in the vast, vaulted hall. Me, standing by the open safe, my hands shaking with the adrenaline come down. Harlan Kellen, leaning on his cane, his face a sudden, deep map of exhaustion. And my father. Gavin Whitfield was a ghost. He was still slumped in the mahogany chair, a prisoner of his own cowardice. He stared at the photograph of my mother, his wife, his hand trembling so badly he couldn't touch it. I finally turned to Harlan. My voice was hoarse. "You knew," I whispered. "It wasn't a question. You knew from the very beginning. You set this all up." Harlan let out a long, slow breath. The sound was like a tear in the fabric of the room. He walked, his limp more pronounced now, to a high-backed chair near the fireplace. He sank into it. "Yes," he said. He looked at me, his hawk-like eyes softened by a profound, bone-deep weariness. "This house, Clara, it is mine. It was my wife's. When I built Meridian, I named it after this house, Renmore, and my daughter's favorite poem. It was always meant to be the heart of the family. I have been living in the East Library, as an anonymous tenant, for 2 years. My mind reeled. The man I was paid to ignore, the man I had confessed to. "But why?" I asked. "Why this deception?" "A memo from God," he said, a dry, humorless smile touching his lips. 2 years and 3 months ago, I had a stroke, a transient ischemic attack, mild, no permanent damage, but it was a warning. I had been living in Switzerland, estranged, angry, retired, and I realized, with the sort of clarity only a brush with death can provide, that I had no idea who was running my legacy. Who was Meridian and Wake? Who was the family in my family business? He gestured around the hall. "So I came back, but I couldn't come back as Harlan Kellen. That name, it's a spotlight, it's a wall. It makes people lie, and bow, and scrape. I wanted to see the truth. I wanted to see the company as its janitor sees it. So I became one." He set up the tenancy through a Swiss law firm. He lived in the library. He watched. He listened. "I knew Sloane was a viper the moment your father brought her into the company," he said, his voice hardening. "But I didn't know how deep her venom went until I started listening. Northline Sanitation. It was clumsy, but arrogant. She was funneling money, padding her own accounts, using my house, as her vehicle. I had the what, I just needed the how, and I needed a witness, someone on the inside, who wasn't already poisoned, someone I could trust, not with the name Kellen, but with the truth." "Me," I whispered. "You found me, the night cleaner." "I didn't find you, Clara," he said, and his voice softened. He looked at the floor, at the veins in the marble. "I recognized you." He paused. "That first night, when I saw you scrubbing, I told you, You clean along the grain, like my daughter used to. You, you knew my mother, I said. I knew Eleanor, he said, his voice thick. Before she was Eleanor Whitfield. Before Gavin, she was a designer. In a small textile workshop that my family foundation sponsored. She was brilliant, fierce. She hated artifice. He looked at his hands, at the wide platinum ring, the ring with the K. This ring, he said, touching it. I've worn it since the day I walked away from my own son. My breath hitched. His son? I had 2 children, he explained, seeing my confusion. Eleanor and my son, Robert, was a lot like your father. He saw the company as a vault, not a legacy. He wanted to bleed it. I fought him. I fought the board. I lost. So I left them. I left the company I had built. I told them I was dead to them. I kept this ring as a reminder of my failure. My son ran the company into the ground, and your father was his protege. When Robert died, Gavin and Sloane were perfectly positioned to save the company, to steal it, and I, in my arrogant exile, let them. Then, I lost Eleanor, too. He looked back at the marble floor, his gaze distant. I was at Eleanor's workshop, one evening, a charity event, and I found her, long after everyone had left, scrubbing the marble steps at the entrance, on her hands and knees, just like you. He smiled, a true sad smile. I asked her what she was doing. She looked up at me, annoyed. You always follow the grain, Mr. Kellen, she said. It's the only way to get the dirt out. She taught me. Your mother taught me. His gaze found mine. When I saw you, in my library, with a bruise on your face, cleaning my floor, and cleaning it wrong, I had to say something. It was a memory, a ghost. When you told me your name, Clara Whitfield, I knew. You were Eleanor's daughter, and you were here. He leaned forward. I already knew about Northline. I was already watching Sloane, but when she cut your salary, forcing you to take the very job that was her cover, the irony was poetic, and when I listened, when I heard you, a risk analyst, refuse her order to smooth the numbers. He shook his head. You became the linchpin. You passed a test you didn't even know you were taking. You weren't just Eleanor's daughter. You were hers. You had her strength, the strength your father lacks. The library, I realized, the cane. The East Library was not a retreat, he confirmed. It was my command center. This cane, this is my key. He held it up. It's a biometric scanner, a network proxy, a transmitter. It bypasses all of Meridian's firewalls. It gave me the server logs. It gave me Sloane's emails. And today, it gave me the power to turn this great hall into a global boardroom, the live stream, the recordings. It was all controlled from that cane. He looked down, his moment of triumph fading. His gaze settled on my cheek, on the dark, ugly bruise. His voice dropped, the iron gone, replaced by a deep, pained regret. I had to let it happen, he whispered. I had to let her build her gallows. I had to let her commit, fully, on the record. I knew she was a bully. I did not anticipate her violence. He met my eyes. That meant you had to be the bait. I had to let her harm you. I had to let her frame you. I had to wait until the last possible second, until she had sealed her own fate. It was the only way to ensure this was a checkmate, that there was no escape. He paused. I am sorry. Clara, I am truly sorry that for my plan to work, you had to suffer. I let you take that blow, alone. I looked at this old, brilliant, ruthless man. This stranger, my grandfather, he had used me. He had used my pain, but he had also saved me. He had given me the weapons to save myself. My gaze shifted, moving past him, to the only other person in the room. My father. He was looking at me, his face, which I had only ever seen as passive, or placating, or weak, was crumpled. It was the face of a man who had seen the sum of his life, and it was 0. His hands were on the table, twisting, the fingers trembling. Tears were rolling, silently, down his cheeks, dropping onto the photograph of my mother. "Clara," he choked out. The name was a prayer. "Clara, please, I'm sorry." I looked at him, the man who sat silent while I was framed, the man who read a script to destroy me, the man who, for 20 years, had traded my mother's memory for a corner office and a quiet life. I felt a surge of nothing, not rage, not pity, just a cold, hard, immense clarity. The emotional part of the day was over. The work was just beginning. I took a deep, steadying breath. The air in the hall was cool, smelling of old wood, beeswax, and the faint, clean scent of the rain that had finally stopped. "Justice, Dad," I said, my voice flat, leaving no room for negotiation. First, accountability, a full, public, cooperation with the audit. I looked from his broken face to my grandfather's waiting one. "Family," I said. "We can discuss later." My words hung in the air, a final cold sentence. "Family, we can discuss later." It was a dismissal. My father seemed to shrink. The last bit of fight, the last flicker of self, extinguishing. He just nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. Harlan Kellen gave a single, sharp nod. The apology was over. The absolution was not given. He turned to me, all business. "The board, and the shareholders, have vested you with interim control, but control without terms is just chaos. What are your terms, Ms. Whitfield?" He was doing it deliberately, shifting from Clara to Ms. Whitfield in front of my father, forcing the transition. "Mr. Graves," I called out. The lawyer, who had been hovering by the door, flinched and turned back. "You will remain. You are, for the moment, still general counsel. You will draft the resolutions, and they are not negotiable." I stepped away from my father, away from the personal wreckage, and stood in the center of the hall. I stood on the clean, veined marble I knew by heart. I felt the cold, solid stone through the thin soles of my shoes. I began, my voice clear and precise, each word a cold needle. "Sloan Armitage, she will sign a full resignation, effective immediately. She will sign a non-compete, a non-disclosure, and a full binding confession of her actions, to be held in escrow by this firm." Graves started to speak. "Ms. Whitfield, a confession." "I'm not finished," I cut him off. "She will cooperate, fully, with the independent forensic audit, and she will agree to a full clawback of all salary, bonuses, and stock options dating back 24 months. All ill-gotten gains, including the 2.3% from the Bracken Fund, will be returned to the company's general fund within 30 days. If she refuses, the complete, unedited live stream, all server logs, and her recorded confession of smoothing the numbers will be hand-delivered to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York by 5 o'clock today. Your choice." Graves swallowed. "And Mr. Whitfield?" he asked, his voice low. I looked at my father. He didn't look up. He was a hollow man in an expensive suit. "2," I said. "Gavin Whitfield. He will tender his immediate resignation from the board of directors and his position as executive vice president in acknowledgement of his cooperation. Today, the company will not pursue clawbacks. He will be permitted to retain his basic vested pension. He will, however, serve for 1 calendar year, unpaid, as a special consultant." My father looked up, a flicker of confusion. "A special consultant," I repeated, "to the board of a new, independent fund this company will endow. We will call it the Eleanor Fund." Harlan's head snapped up. He was watching me intently. 3, I finalized. "Meridian and Wake will capitalize this fund, effective immediately. Its mission will be to provide scholarships, grants, and professional certifications for low-wage and night-shift workers in the financial services industry, the cleaners, the security guards, the data entry clerks, the people who, like my mother, are invisible, but see everything. The fund's endowment will be capitalized by the exact amount Sloane Armitage stole. My father will advise them on corporate ethics. He will spend 1 year listening to the people he ignored. The 3 points landed in the silence. They were not suggestions. They were an ultimatum. Harlan Kellen smiled, a thin, proud, approving smile. He held up his hand. "A supplement to that motion," Harlan said, speaking again to Graves, who was frantically typing on his phone. "As principal of the Kingsley Trust, I move to formally ratify Ms. Whitfield's Eleanor Fund initiative, and I add this. Upon the successful passage and execution of these 3 conditions, I, Harlan Kellen, will execute a legal transfer. 12% of my 18% stake in Meridian and Wake Holdings will be placed in a blind trust, with Clara Eleanor Whitfield as the sole, lifetime beneficiary. She will not just be the interim controller, she will be a principal." He looked at me. "You cannot clean a house you do not own. Clara, you were cleaning my house. Now you will clean your house." The weight of it, the 12% stake, the ownership, was a physical blow. It was power, real, permanent, and terrifying. Graves looked like he was going to faint. This is a complete restructuring in an hour. "You have 30 minutes. Mr. Graves," Harlan said, "draft the resolutions. Bring Sloane Armitage back in here. It is time to sign." Graves fled. The next 40 minutes were the longest of my life. I stood by the cold fireplace. Harlan sat, watching. My father did not move. The doors opened. Graves returned, and with him, Sloane. She had fixed her makeup. She wore a mask of pure, frigid composure. She was flanked by her own lawyer, a man I hadn't seen before, who looked hard, expensive, and utterly grim. "You have the documents, Graves?" Sloane's voice was a brittle whisper. Graves placed the thick stack of papers on the center table. "This is coercion," Sloane's lawyer said, his voice a low, theatrical rumble. "My client signs this under duress. It will not hold up." Harlan laughed. It was a dry, awful sound. "Duress?" he said. "Please, I'll call the U.S. Attorney's office right now. We can wait for them. They can be witnesses. Or she can sign. And walk out that door a free and poor woman. Today, her choice." He tapped his phone. "In fact, just to expedite things," he looked at Sloane's lawyer. "My assistant has just forwarded the complete evidence packet to the district attorney's office. Just a courtesy copy, you understand. They are awaiting my further instruction as to whether this is a corporate matter or a criminal one." Sloane's lawyer's face went gray. He turned and whispered, urgently, in her ear. She stared at me. Her eyes were not human. They were burning coals of hate. She snatched the pen from Graves. She didn't read the documents. She just signed. Page after page, Sloane Armitage, Sloane Armitage, Sloane Armitage, the confession, the resignation, the clawback. She signed away her entire life, her signature a violent, angry slash. When she was done, she threw the pen. It clattered across the table and fell to the floor. "You will never, ever be one of us, Clara," she hissed, her voice a venomous promise. "You are just a cleaner with a lucky name." "I know," I said, "and you are just a thief. Get out of my house." She turned, and she was gone. Now there was only one. Graves slid the second, thinner stack of papers to my father. My father picked up the pen Sloane had thrown. He held it. His hand was shaking so badly he couldn't aim it at the paper. "Clara," he whispered. Tears were rolling down his face again. Late tears. Useless tears. "Eleanor, she would have forgiven me." "Maybe," I said. My voice was cold. "But she isn't here. I am." He flinched, as if I had struck him. He looked at the paper. He looked at my mother's photograph, still on the table. He closed his eyes. He signed away his job. He signed away his seat. He signed away the last, tattered remnant of his honor. He signed himself into the service of the wife he had betrayed. He pushed the papers back, and he sat there, a completely broken man, weeping silently into his hands. I had won. I felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. I felt cold, and I felt tired. "The room is heavy," I said, to no one in particular. "I can't breathe." I walked to the great hall's towering 40-foot-tall glass doors, the ones that led to the stone terrace. They had been closed for as long as I could remember, sealing the house like a tomb. "Open them," I said. Harlan nodded to a security guard I hadn't even noticed, standing in the shadows. The guard pressed a button. With a deep, hydraulic sigh, the massive doors shuddered and then slid open. The rain had stopped. A shaft of pale, late afternoon sun cut through the gray clouds. It streamed into the hall, illuminating the millions of dust motes dancing in the air. It hit the floor, the endless black and white marble floor. The stone, scrubbed clean by my own hands, was suddenly brilliant, reflecting the light like a perfect, polished mirror. Harlan Kellen stood up. He walked to the center of the room. He raised his walnut cane. He tapped it, once, on the floor, thud. The small, dark, dome-shaped camera high in the rafters, the one that had recorded this final, private execution, blinked. Its small, red, evidential light went dark. The record was sealed. As I stood in the fresh, gano air, I heard the sound of vacuums from the West Wing. The day shift. A group of women in the same blue polo shirts I used to wear walked past the end of the hall, pushing their own carts. One of them, a woman named Maria, who I had often shared a silent, tired 3 a.m. nod with at shift change, saw me. She looked at me, in my wrinkled suit, my face bruised. She looked at Harlan Kellen. She looked at my broken father. She didn't look away. She didn't cower. She just looked at me, and she smiled. A small, real, knowing smile. A smile between colleagues. I nodded back. My phone, in my blazer pocket, buzzed. I pulled it out. It was an email. Not from Sloan, not from Harlan. It was from the acting chairman of the compensation committee, a man in Singapore I had never met, who had just watched the entire live stream. The subject line was simple. Subject, transition. The email was one line. "Congratulations on your appointment. Interim CEO. Your access codes are attached. The market opens in 12 hours. Interim CEO." I looked at the phone. I looked at the clean, sunlit marble. I remembered the first night, in the dark, my cheeks stinging, the smell of ammonia, the confusion. You clean along the grain. Everything had just snapped shut. The circle was closed. I put the phone back in my pocket. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a vast, cold, empty space. I was in charge. I turned. Harlan was watching me. The transformation was absolute. The iron-hard corporate raider, the vengeful founder, the grand chess master. He was gone. All that was left was an old, tired man, leaning on a cane, his eyes soft with a grief I was only just beginning to understand. He was no longer a legend. He was just my grandfather. My father's apology hung in the room, a thin, useless vapor. "Do right," I had commanded. "From now on." He didn't have a response. He just sank, his body folding in on itself. A man erased. Harlan Kellen let the silence hold for a moment, a final beat of respect for the execution that had just concluded. Then he moved. He walked to a small, hidden panel by the grand fireplace, the one that had held the safe. He pressed a latch, and a drawer slid open. From it, he took a large, heavy, iron ring. It held dozens of keys, old skeleton keys, modern high-security keys, and thick, brass fobs. He walked over to me. His face was no longer the face of a grandfather. It was, once again, the face of a founder, a grantor. He held out the ring. The metal was cold, worn smooth from a century of use. "Renmore House," he said, his voice quiet, but resonating in the vast, open hall. It is, as I said, a founding asset, and it is now yours. Live in it, sell it, tear it down and plant a forest. Your choice. The deed will be filed with the stock transfer. I took the keys. The weight was extraordinary. I was holding the keys to my own prison, my own sanctuary. I accept the house, I said. My eyes drifted from the keys, across the hall, to the massive, dark oak doors of the East Library. They were closed. On the door, a small, polished, brass plaque, which I had dusted 100 times, read simply, "The Library." I nodded, more to myself than to him. "But I am keeping the library," I said. "I'll keep the plaque. That is where the truth began. It stays." "As it should," Harlan murmured. Mr. Graves, who had been hovering like a pale ghost, stepped forward, his professionalism a thin, brittle shield. He held a final, single document and a pen. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, his voice a dry croak. "The resolution codifying the transfer of 12% of the Kingsley Trust to your new holding entity. It requires your signature." He offered me the pen. I took it, a heavy black fountain pen. Not his. I realized it was Harlan's, the one from the library, engraved with the HK. I looked down at the paper. The legalese was dense, but the intent was clear. "Does hereby grant, transfer, and assign 12% to Clara Eleanor Whitfield." My name, my full name, my mother's name. I put the pen to the paper. I signed Clara, and then I signed Whitfield. I felt the ink, a rich, dark blue, flow from the nib, and I did it, consciously, deliberately. I drew the cross of the T as a single, long, defiant line, stretching over the rest of the name, a sword, my mother's signature, my proof. I put the pen down. A movement at the edge of the hall. It was Sloane. Her lawyer was at her side, his hand on her elbow, guiding her out. She was not the same woman who had entered the catalyst room. Her face was marble, her eyes dead. She walked past me, not 10 feet away. She did not look up. My eyes fell to her wrist, the heavy, polished, brutalist gold bracelet she always wore, the one whose metallic edge had struck my cheek along with her diamond, was gone. She had already taken it off. She was stripped, a non-entity. She disappeared through the service door, a ghost, finally and completely exorcised. At the far end of the hall, near the open doors, my father slowly stood up. He was a man with nowhere to go. He was in his wife's house, which was now his daughter's house. He was in the company he had served, which was now the company he was exiled from. He looked at me, his face a ruin of shame. "Clara, I am sorry," he whispered. It was the only word he had. I looked at him. The cold, hard clarity was still there. Forgiveness was a luxury. It was a currency I did not have and he had not earned. "Do right," I said again. "From now on, go talk to the auditors. Tell them everything." He flinched, then nodded. He turned and walked, a man with no shadow, out into the pale, cold daylight, leaving me alone with my grandfather. I turned to the small lectern Mr. Graves had been using. The internal company network was still active. I knew, without being told, that an all-hands, all-staff email had gone out. Emergency meeting, leadership transition, the entire company, from Halverton to Singapore, was holding its breath. I stepped up to the lectern. I found the small built-in microphone. I pressed the broadcast button. "To all employees of Meridian and Wake," I said, my voice, my real voice, echoed in the hall, and simultaneously, in the headsets and on the laptops of 10,000 people. "My name is Clara Whitfield. What you have read in the corporate memos, the talk of transparency, integrity, that has, until today, been a slogan, a word on a wall." I leaned in. "Effective immediately. Transparency is no longer a slogan. It is a procedure. It is a protocol. It is the only way we will do business. The audit begins now. Work with the auditors. The truth is now our only metric. That is all. I clicked the microphone off. Harlan, watching, nodded. The last piece was in place. He walked to the center of the room, to the exact spot where the light from the open doors hit the marble floor. He raised his walnut cane. He tapped it on the stone. Thud! High in the rafters, the small, dark, dome-shaped camera, the one that had recorded this final, private transfer of power, blinked. Its small, red, evidential light went dark. The record was sealed. The sun was setting. The great soaring lights of the hall, which had been on full blast for the meeting, began to dim, one by one, returning to their usual, hushed, evening state. Soon, the only light was the pale blue twilight, pouring in from the open terrace, reflecting off the floor. The marble was a perfect, dark, clean mirror. Harlan leaned on his cane. The fatigue was back, settling on him like a shroud. He looked at the floor, and then at me. A small, tired smile touched his lips. "You follow the grain perfectly, Clara," he said, his voice a low rasp, the words that had started it all. I looked down at the shining, veined stone. Then I looked back at him, the new weight of the keys in my hand, the 12% stake settling in my bones. "Yes," I said. "Now, I go clean the books." He held my gaze. He nodded. Once, a passing of the torch. He turned and walked toward the great, open doors. The dry, cool autumn wind swept into the hall, carrying the smell of oak and damp earth. I heard his footsteps on the stone, and the sound of his cane. Thud, thud. And then, the final sound. The sound of his cane striking the stone terrace outside, as he stepped into the twilight and left me in the house. A single final decisive click. Thank you for listening to this story. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Your feedback is what builds this community. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like the video, and give us a little extra support by hitting that hype button. It helps us reach more listeners just like you.